Hello to you, News, War, Spirituality, joining us on this unique special episode here from Tel Aviv, all the way to Australia, Sydney. Dan, Hawworth, Shalom, how are you?
Shalom, Netanel. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here with you. I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you very much. An attorney for many years, a representative and meditation teacher and student in the Brahma Kumaris, one of the largest spiritual organizations led by women, by the way. We'll talk about it in a second. Dan, when you heard about the news of the war, Gaza, Israel, you initially felt...
Initial feeling is, we feel naturally, I think, as human beings, so much compassion because this world is one family and no one wants to see our brothers and sisters suffering in any part of the world. And so to see such extraordinary suffering, it's a sad thing. And we know how people there must be going through so much.
You're saying that we're all brothers and sisters, and yet some of the things that happened here were never happening in a family. The atrocities, the murders, the rape. How can you explain that in a spiritual perspective?
Yeah. Across the whole world, there are so many atrocities that human beings do to other human beings. And human beings have lost the awareness that we are actually one family, that we are spiritual brothers. They have taken on so many different identities and false beliefs and taken them into their hearts. And then they operate and act out in this world based on those understandings. And that leads to so much suffering and sorrow. And we see that not only in Israel, but in so many countries, right? We have a situation with Ukraine and Russia. We have so many parts of the world where no one is acting in a way which is consistent with that type of spiritual understanding.
Are you optimistic?
I'm very optimistic. Yeah. I feel positive about life. I feel positive about the future. But I'm also quite aware that there is a lot of suffering and pain in our world.
Dan Hawworth, ContentoNow, starting now. Dan Hawworth from Sydney, Australia. We're going to visualize here during this episode about news, war, and spirituality, a few testimonials that are coming from Israel about stories, things that are deeply happening here in the hearts of the people, in Israel, in Gaza, elsewhere in the world, and giving and having your spiritual perspective regarding them. So let's start listening and having your views.
My name is Ron Lepidot, and I was born in Canada. I'm the third generation Canadian citizen. Unfortunately, during the recent attack on the state of Israel, my daughter Tiferet was apparently taken hostage by Hamas. You can't see at night how days will become a long nightmare. And I believe that you can understand our situation. I want to hug my daughter. That's it. The Canadian government doesn't seem to recognize a moral obligation to help my daughter. Please, I need your help in demanding the Prime Minister of Canada to save my daughter from the hands of Hamas. Please, share this video and help me by contacting the party that can influence the position of the Canadian government to free my daughter. Thank you very much.
What do you feel?
My immediate feeling is compassion for a father who is suffering, who misses his daughter. He's speaking from his heart, and one can feel, his love and the sincerity of his plea. the plight of his situation.
Practically, what would you recommend a father that is suffering so much?
Practically, and this is where, for me, spirituality is so important in an individual's life, is that everyone has to go through different situations at different times in their life. And a lot of things we have to reconcile inside of ourselves because, for example, he may not succeed in influencing the position of the Canadian government, but he still has influence over the thoughts he creates in response to that difficult situation. And he can still try and improve his own internal response and feelings towards it. And so spirituality tries to get us to look inside, to empower ourselves so that even when we're facing a situation where externally we may feel disempowered, how can we reframe it, rethink about it in a way that starts to empower us again?
Dan, you're an attorney. You're a lawyer for many years. You're a very practical person. When a father is hearing that his daughter was kidnapped, what internal change he can make in order to feel better?
Actually, I think he will naturally look to some sort of spiritual or religious or meditative practice to find solace at this time, because he'll probably reach a point where externally he feels he can't do anything. And often that sense of powerlessness pushes people inside. Maybe it pushes them towards their sense of God and communing with whoever the divinity in their life is. Maybe it will just push him towards his own thought processes, but I think it will naturally do that.
And do you think that the faith, the belief, will empower him?
People have different faiths and beliefs, and how people go inside can be very different. For some people, it can push them inside to generate feelings of hatred and resentment. So really, people respond differently. Part of what the Brahmakumaris teach is to try and give people a framework that allows them to adopt more constructive responses that help them feel more at peace with themselves inside.
Let's see together, with your permission, another testimonial.
Clock strikes upon the hour and the sun begins to fade. Still enough time to figure out how to chase my blues away. I've done alright up till now. It's the light of day that shows me how. And when the night falls, ooh, I wanna dance with somebody. I wanna feel the heat with somebody. Yeah, I wanna dance with somebody. With somebody who loves me.
צריך להחזיר את תומר
כמה שיותר מהר.
I wanna feel the heat with somebody. Yeah, I wanna dance with somebody. With somebody who loves me.
כפרה על הברלין.
You were mentioning trying to find an eternal connection to God, and you're seeing that people are praying for Omer. Is it solvable to find inner strength within this kind of atrocities, of murders, of kidnaps?
Actually, many times it's when people have to deal with disaster and atrocity that they find their deeper inner strength and their deeper resources. Sometimes it actually brings out the best in the human spirit in the longer term, that these things push us on a personal journey that takes us to new places inside that, we may not have wanted to go. If you want, I can relate my own personal experience, but
Yes.
When I was like 20 years old, just under 20 years old, my brother was killed in an avalanche. And definitely to lose someone close to me at the time was tragic. And at that time, I wouldn't have wanted anyone to tell me that it would lead to positive experiences or that I should go inside myself and, look within. I would have not been ready to hear those things. But after a couple of years, it became such a shaping experience that changed the trajectory of my life in a very positive and constructive direction. And so it's difficult, to introduce sometimes spiritual concepts and ideas in the immediate aftermath of tragedy, because people have to go through their own grieving process and healing process before they can, in a sense, the dust has to settle after the storm before people can be ready to see how things have shifted.
Who shared with you the awful news about your father, about your family, about your brother when you were under 20?
Did you ask? My parents came to my house early in the morning. The police had been to see them, and then they came to see me and let me know.
Do you remember the first seconds, the first minutes when they let you know about your brother?
A little bit, yeah, because it was unusual, like, for my parents to spontaneously visit me like that, and just to come to the house. So there was like a curiosity and also waking me up in the morning. And it was a sort of a hit in the guts type of a feeling and a shock type of a feeling. And also at that time, actually, there wasn't news that he had died, just news that there was an avalanche. And, people get buried in snow. So we had to wait for some time before there was any confirmation of whether he had survived or had been killed.
The first instinct is to go and to try to save your brother?
Actually, the first instinct was total powerlessness, because, I am so far away from the site of the avalanche, and there's nothing I can do. And I just have to wait for news updates from the police who are connected to the search and rescue. And so there was definitely a sort of a despair and an unknowing, like, is he alive or dead? What's his fate? I'm totally in the dark. And in some ways, the uncertainty was worse than getting the news that actually he had passed away.
And after a few days, they found him?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, they use dogs, because the sense of smell of the dog can find people deep under snow. And so once the dog had sort of sniffed a few areas, they were able to sort of excavate the snow. And then only they find out if the person has been able to trap air around their mouth, and therefore potentially breathe for some period of time, or if they're completely encased in snow, in which case they die of asphyxiation. So in this case, the actual, legal cause of death was traumatic asphyxiation.
So basically, your brother had no time to try to overcome the obstacles, to go out of the snow. It just happened.
Actually, there were 4 climbers together, and it was a very small, like only a 30 centimeter shift in the snow face that broke. And the 2 climbers who were lower down were pushed into crevasses. So the snow packed them in to cracks in the ice face. And the 2 climbers who are higher up were fortunate that they didn't get pushed into any crevasses, and they just sort of cascaded or surfed down with the snow. One of them had some leg damage, so he was unable to move much. but one of them was actually in quite good condition, and he was able to walk to safety, which was like 8 hours of walking to raise the alarm. Because when you're in isolated terrain, to actually even get to a point where you can communicate with someone is a massive thing.
I'm sure that you've been talking with him.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with them after the event. This is 2002, sorry, 2000, by the way, the year 2000. So it's some time ago. But yeah, definitely I spent a lot of time with the survivors. And the survivors themselves went through a lot of trauma because they felt guilty that they lived and their two close friends died. And, there was only 5 meters between them. Every 5 meters in the rope, there would be a climber. So I think it's a good thing, in terms of destiny, right? Because the gap is so small, but when it's one's time and destiny to have that change, destiny cannot be prevented in that way.
Within the few first seconds, when they shared that with you, they had the opportunity to talk with your brother, or the connection and the communication was immediately shut?
Immediately shut. They were all just fending for themselves. As the snow moved, they were all just start to move with the snow, trying to sort of, I think you try and swim with it. And so they didn't really see what happened to anyone else. It was quick, it was fast. They all just did their own best to survive.
We'll come to the story a bit more, with your permission, a bit later. When you met them, how they refilled you?
I mean, it was very significant to be able to hear about, the events of the day, and to see photos of, their last trip together. And it was also good to have the opportunity to, like, they may have felt guilty they survived, but I just felt so grateful that they did so much and everything they possibly could. And, the young man who had to walk by himself for 8 long hours, knowing that his good friends were in such dire situation. I know my heart really went out to him for what he had to go through, because it must have been a very long walk for him.
And do you think that this experience, which is quite similar to what is happening with the people that were kidnapped from their home, they're in tunnels, the communication is shut down, some of the family members stayed, some of them survived, some of them are feeling guilty. This is what is happening in the war right now. Here in the borders, we're talking about 1 hour and 25 minutes from here, from the studios of ContentoNow in Tel Aviv. So what helped you to climb out of the emotional and spiritual tunnel of loss and grief?
My first steps weren't good ones. My immediate response was a lot of feeling sorry for myself, a lot of being caught in questions of why him, why did this have to happen, and just that was sort of like a whirlpool that sucked me down into a very low state of being. And also I turned to alcohol and a little bit of drugs to console myself, which really achieved nothing in terms of longer term healing. It was very much to sort of, I think, blunten the pain, but it was really pointless. But that's what I did. So
when you're saying alcohol, if you could share a bit more about it.
Alcohol, beer, wine, spirits.
And when you're saying drugs?
Marijuana.
And what did it help in any way in the short term?
I had a perception that it helped me, but in hindsight, actually, it was really unconstructive, because the way it helps, I think, is damaging to the rest of my psychology. So I wouldn't encourage anyone to try and use that, because I don't think it heals people. I think it delays healing and prolongs the process of suffering. It creates some sort of short-term relief. It's like maybe anesthetizing some emotional pain that I'm feeling, but it doesn't help it go away at all.
Did you have any community, someone that you can be asking any kind of guidance, help?
Yeah, interesting question. It probably would have been available, but my nature was to keep all my emotions inside, and that really worked against me. Maybe it's partly a male gender thing. Maybe it was just kind of my nature was like that. But for me, I internalized a lot, and I felt that other people couldn't understand, and I could no longer relate to other people's situations in the same way. So I removed myself quite a bit from my peer group and my friends at that time.
Talking about community, let's see together another short report that is coming here live to tape in the borders.
Bruno Villanau, she is a 24-year-old student from Brazil who was killed by Hamas at that music festival in southern Israel on Saturday morning that we have heard so much about. Well, Bruno's mother and her sister recently moved to Israel, and they just don't know a lot of people here. So they went on social media and asked for 10 people to come to the funeral. That is the number required for any Jewish religious service. It is called a minyan. And this is what they got. Instead of 10 people, tens of thousands of Israelis responded to share in the family's grief.
The power of community.
Yeah, very beautiful. How must they have felt to get that response? Very touching.
And after you were isolated and grieving with alcohol and sometimes drugs, what was the next phase of your recovery?
Recollecting, I also would go hiking a lot in the natural environment. New Zealand's a very beautiful country to live in. And I spent quite a lot of time actually with my deceased brother's friends, including the people who were with him on the day of the accident. And that, I think, was very healing for me. It was very healing to be in nature, to be in such beautiful, pristine environments, and also very healing to be with his friends. There was somehow a shared understanding that was unspoken between us. And yeah, they cared for me in a way of just giving their company and including me on some of their outings. It wasn't healing in the sense that we spent a long time talking about our feelings or something like that, but it was healing in the sense of togetherness and continuing with life, moving on in that way.
Is it something that you also thinking about going in the same living path of your brother?
Okay. Nothing so extreme as he was doing. We would take all of our food and everything on a pack, 20 to 25 kilos, and walk in nature for 4 or 5 days. New Zealand has many such tracks where you can stay in isolated huts and be completely in the natural environment and not really see anyone except a few other hikers for the 4 or 5 or 6 days of that walk. But nothing like the mountaineering and getting into the ice and snow. That requires a lot more skill and experience that I didn't have, and equipment that I didn't have, so I didn't get into that level of it.
What was the next phase regarding the recovery, regarding you going into the spiritual journey?
Yeah, and it probably was the spiritual journey that was the next phase, because in a sense, it was not really conscious, but it created a lot of questions inside of me on some level. and I was keenly interested in Buddhism. I was finding it interesting to think about the things that they were sharing. I didn't really feel connected to any of the systems of wisdom that they had, but I really valued getting a different perspective on life. And I found a lot of the things that they taught quite enriching. I also had some really good Christian friends who I spent time with. And yeah, eventually I did come across the Brahma Kumaris. And for me, that was a spiritual path that there was an instant, profound resonance with the knowledge, the teachings, and the spiritual practices. I found really rewarding.
Give me the first example of something that you felt that for you it was very rewarding.
Yeah. Well, I may have misspoken, because it was rewarding and confronting at the same time. So for even the spiritual understanding that each person is a soul, I personally found very confronting, because I didn't have a spiritual or religious context where I accepted that understanding. And I found it hard to reconcile that if my brother was a soul and he hasn't died, but the soul has just left the body, he's gone somewhere else and that part has finished, then how can I feel so hurt? Why does it burn inside if he hasn't actually died in, the sense in which I previously thought he died? So that whole notion that someone is a soul, actually, I found very confronting at first. And initially I rejected that because it didn't resonate with how I felt. I couldn't reconcile that with my own emotions.
So what was the response when you suddenly started listening to a new approach that your brother physically is dead, yet his soul just left his body?
Yeah. So initially when I heard that, it was to reject that understanding as something that I didn't believe. But I did continue with the meditation practice. And actually in meditation, I had the really profound experience where I felt myself as a being of light. And I felt like I was in front of myself, seeing myself from the outside. And I could see myself as energy. I wasn't this physical skin that contains the energy. I was the energy inside. I was light. And that experience created a total shift, because based on that experience, if I am that, other people are also that. Therefore, my brother is also that. And it created a big movement of emotional energy inside, because I could accept that I am energy. He was also energy. His energy has left that body, but the energy continues, but he's changed costume. That skin that he was in has finished.
It's amazing to hear you, because during your life journey, your physical life journey, you're also a lawyer, an attorney, person of legal system. So you're very practical. How this can be combined within one person, one soul done?
I think, perhaps, you're alluding to the fact that legal work and legal training tends to be, what we often call more left-brained, rational, analytical, non-emotional. And I think definitely I have that side of my personality as well that is more non-emotional, cold and rational about things. But I couldn't refute my own experience that I experienced myself as pure consciousness, as a living being completely separate from this physical body. And, that experience of who I am just really forced me to change my thinking. It was also quite challenging because my worldview was quite materialistic. And so to try and accept that I'm not just this material body took some time.
Took some time, but as part of the ticking clock was when you created the meditation and you felt like you're beyond your body, that enabled you to believe in that?
It enabled me to believe in that, and it also, ignited something that started to create flow-on effects, because it's a concept that has massive consequences for the way we deal with life.
For instance,
if I'm a spiritual being, then Netanel is also a spiritual being. I can see your physical body, but inside your physical body there is an energy of a soul, and that is the real you. And if I am that, you must also be that. And if you're also that, so is everyone else. So my sense in which I'm perceiving everyone as separate and different is something which is like what I think of now as a learned behavior, that I've been trained by society, by that sort of left brain analytical self, to divide everyone, to create barriers and separation based on nationality, based on religion, based on skin color, based on gender. And all of these things create a perception, a real experience and perception, but it's still created, not organic or original, a created perception of separateness and difference. And this perception of separateness and difference does so much damage in the world, as well as damage in our own personal lives.
Let's see this perception as it's being felt in the world, in the variety of TV studios.
The chant from the river to the sea. Yeah, let's look at the map. Here's the river, here's the sea. Oh, I see, it means you get all of it. Not just the West Bank, which was basically the original UN partition deal you rejected because you wanted all of it and always have, even though it's indisputably also the Jews' ancestral homeland. And so you attacked and lost, and attacked again and lost, and attacked again and lost. As my friend Dr. Phil says, how's that working for you? Look at what Mexico used to own, all the way up to the top of California. But no Mexican is out there chanting from the Rio Grande to Portland, Oregon, because they chose a different path. They got real and built a country that's the world's 14th biggest economy now, because they knew the United States wasn't going to give back Phoenix any more than Hamas will ever be in Tel Aviv.
So what can be done with this kind of perception, not accepting each other's presence, each other's souls?
One thing I often think about with these sorts of scenarios is it's critical to create a separation between political solution and personal solution. As far as I see it, spirituality doesn't offer political solutions. It offers personal solutions for each one's individual life circumstance. And sometimes we want to try and create political solutions because we see massive global problems. And I don't see that as the role of spirituality, because, we can't force other human beings to change. One of the fundamental insights of being a soul, understanding that I am a spiritual being of energy, is that each person has their own spiritual journey. And I can't force someone else to wake up to understand they're a spiritual being. I can't force someone else to change their racist attitude or their otherwise what we might say is a body conscious attitude. Yeah.
Maybe it's not the responsibility of the spiritual leaders and teachers as you, but see what is happening in the world.
شو بدهم يسوون؟ يوسخوا فيهم يعني ينيلوهم
You know, I feel sometimes people have good intentions, but the type of media they create actually fuels hatred and fuels further division. You know, for example, to suggest that all people can be gathered under one title or umbrella and dealt with as a collective mass is not true, right? You know, Hamas are Palestinians, other people are Palestinians. They're a group of diverse human beings that hold different views. You know, the vast majority of them probably don't want to have anything to do with war or conflict and didn't even know about the terror attacks that were going to be launched. Yet, you know, they are also suffering now as a result of the actions of this group. So on both sides, there is suffering, and on both sides, there are individual, if you like, victims of other people's aggression. And it's there are no winners in this, are there?
So then you're saying that, from your perspective, part of the media is amplifying separation, amplifying polls, amplifying hatred and separation?
Yeah, absolutely. But if people don't understand fundamentally who they are, what else can they do? You know, if people don't recognize that each one is a spiritual being, a soul, they will continue to act out based on their externalized understanding. They may have good intentions, but the foundation isn't there. Even if you were to introduce a spiritual awareness to the government will get thrown out, right? Because they're no longer representing the heart and the voice of the people, because the heart and the voice of the people is in retribution, hatred, etc. You know what I mean?
Yes, and also in Australia, the Aborigines, the minority that are suffering and being struggling to get the rights that all the citizens in Australia deserve. It's also a big conflict and contradiction.
Absolutely. I mean, Australia itself has a very uneasy and uncomfortable historical foundation because the Aboriginal people, you know, the indigenous original people of Australia were treated beyond horrendously.
Any solution? Spiritual one?
Yeah.
Trying to put any kind of concepts, I wouldn't say to politics, but getting in more to bridging to reality. And it also combines governments, polls, media, people.
Yeah. For me, spirituality is a system of understanding and practices that's available for people who want to work things out inside themselves to change their outlook. It doesn't mean that they'll change what they're doing externally in terms of, you know, going this way or that way to deal with whatever's practical, but to deal with how they feel inside, to try and reconcile their own emotions, to try and heal themselves, because many people find that they're in need of some sort of internal healing.
Throughout the meditation and the internal healing, then you personally manage to internally communicate with your late brother?
It's a good question. You know, there definitely were times when I felt his presence after he passed.
When?
One of the most moving times was when I had the responsibility to go and clear out all his personal possessions from where he was living. So I had to pack up all of his things and put them into his vehicle and drive them back to the city where I was living. And there was one moment actually where I felt a presence around me, an energy around me. It's hard to sort of, it's a very intangible thing. And I also felt overcome with emotion, feeling that presence. And I know in many religious and spiritual traditions, they believe that, a departed soul will actually, be around their own things because those are the things that they have emotional connection to. At the time, because I didn't have a belief that people are souls, I just thought that, my mind is distorted by grief and I'm upset and I'm imagining things. So it was only actually a couple of years later when I had those personal experiences of what my true identity is that I really appreciated that it was his actual presence that I felt.
Do you manage sometimes in your daily life to create an internal conversation, gathering with your brother, in between the hearts, in between the conscience, in between, if I may say, the souls?
No, I feel I've let him go because he has to continue his own journey now. And, if we think about life, in anyone's personal journey, people come in and people go out. And it's a fundamental nature of life. And it's actually, it's a distortion in human consciousness that we think that people should be permanently on our train carriage for the journey, so to speak. And it's fundamentally never going to be true, right? There will never ever be anyone who can be permanently on my train carriage for this journey of life except God. But apart from that, everyone will step on at a certain time and step off at a certain time. And I will still be there traveling. And so I feel that a more spiritually awakened approach is to allow people into my life and also to accept when they have to leave my life. It will happen to everyone and we have to be able to allow.
Let's see another story, another testimonials that is challenging this concept of accepting someone that is living our lives.
Music was my first love, and it will be my last. Music of the future, and music of the past. To live without my music would be impossible to do. In this world of troubles, my music pulls me through.
So then how with perhaps you can whisper your music of meditation throughout the few moments in this show.
Sure. So I'll speak some suggested thoughts and people can try and use those thoughts to go inside and feel more at ease and at peace. So at first I just become aware of my breath and start to take deeper and deeper breaths in. And as I breathe in my mind's eye, I imagine that I'm breathing in an energy of light an energy of positivity. And when I exhale, in my mind's eye, I visualize that I'm able to let go of anything old, let go of negativity, anything dark or troubling me. And when I breathe in, I'm replacing it with light, with peace, with an energy of quietness and introspection. So I do this with every breath, breathing in the positivity and the light, and blowing out anything that's troubling me, anything disturbing the mind. I imagine I'm releasing it, letting it go. And inside, I want to entertain the thought that my own original fundamental nature is peace. If I can uncover that original self, before I took inside all the disturbances, underneath all of that is a beautiful, divine being of peace. My core, original, true self. A being of light, a being of kindness and compassion, of love and truth. These are the core qualities of I, the spiritual being, the one inside this body. And as I breathe in, I imagine that I can also breathe in all these good qualities into my being. And again, still exhaling anything old, anything separating me from my true original self. It's the energy of my original self that will start to allow me to heal, to find solace inside. We live in a world where there isn't external justice, and it's up to each one to find their true peace inside. Within their own deepest divinity. And I affirm for myself that I am that being of peace, that being of positivity, being of light. Om Shanti Shalom.
Om Shanti and Shalom. You see the Om.
Shalom.
Exactly. The Shalom Shanti goes from Hebrew, Israel, also to Australia, English, India, and around the world, creating internal peace, peace of mind. If I may ask, towards the last part of the meeting, then, when is your birthday? What is the date?
5/5/1981.
What would you ask for your next birthday, for yourself, to a dream that you would love to accomplish?
The thing closest to my heart that I want to accomplish is, a level of internal purity and closeness to God that allows me to better help and support other souls on this spiritual journey. That is the aim of my life, actually, and something that I wish to always continue to grow towards.
When people from your other community, attorneys, lawyers, will see this interview and will see what you're asking for yourself done, how do you think they would respond?
I think it would be a surprise for them, because this type of side of myself it's not a part of the professional work environment. So but still, people are good, I find, and they will find it interesting, but they may not relate.
Did it bother you, the fact that you're dancing with the dancing images also in the practical daily life with a suit and as a lawyer practicing law, and also with a white suit practicing spirituality? The fact that you're dancing in between the two worlds, how did this affect your life?
Actually, I found that the practice of meditation and a spiritual outlook really improved my whole professional life 200%, because the internal resilience it gave me to help other people manage their problems, really, I didn't have that strength to do that without it. And also the values that I've learned through spirituality have been so critical to my professional development. Though people may not think so, the legal profession really relies on personal integrity. Some don't have it, it's true, but it is such an essential thing as a legal practitioner, and I really learned the meaning and how to practice that through spirituality. So it's really been essential for me.
Dan Hawworth, I want to thank you so much for finding the time all the way from Sydney, Australia. Thank you so much for joining us here.
And my pleasure to be with you, Netanel, and your viewers. Thank you so much. And from my heart, I hope that I haven't said anything that has been upsetting for anyone. I wasn't ready to hear many things until much later on. And, people are very raw at the moment. And so they have to go on their own healing journey, whatever the outcomes might be as we move forward. But there's a lot of healing that has to happen for millions of souls on both sides. And
Thank you, and also thank you. We would like to thank Sharona Stillerman, the head of Mama Kumaris Israel, that is enabling to create and to produce this unique series about news, war, and spirituality. And also thank you for being with us on this episode, ContentoNow TV.